Hello, I got everybody aboard here. Welcome to Evernew. Everybody's here. Everybody arrived right on time. And for those of you who have been watching Evernew for like a year and a half, we always have a DeForest Kelley segment, at least one, every single episode. But because this is the 24th anniversary of Dee's passing just a few days ago on the 11th, I reached out about a month ago, I'm guessing, to other people who had been either inspired, who had either met, been inspired, or in some way influenced by DeForest Kelley's career, either as Dr. McCoy or in any other way. And these are the responses I got. We got a couple more, but they couldn't appear today, so I'll be getting them later on. But I think I'm going to have everybody, does everybody want to introduce themselves briefly? Let's do that, okay? Let's start with Michelle. Michelle is our newbie. She is an hold on, I'm going to see if I can get her as the main star here. There we go. Go ahead, Michelle.
All right, I'm Michelle from North Carolina. So recently actually became a paramedic. So I've been a paramedic since October, so I'm pretty new at that. I've been working EMS for, actually at the end of this month will be a year since I've been in EMS. So it's all still pretty new. Trying to still learn everything.
Woohoo!
I've enjoyed it so far, and I can see myself being in there for at least hopefully 30 years, if my body can hold up that long.
That's got to be a tough job, because you meet people on their absolute worst day, some of the absolute worst days of their lives.
I do, and then of course we carry a lot of stuff in and out of houses, so I do get a good workout on a daily basis or whenever I do work.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been inspired by D, so he's like part of the reason I actually got into EMS, becoming a paramedic, just doing this crazy job.
So I think he would be so proud of you. I just have to say, I think he would be so proud. That is a tough job. I can't even imagine. I cannot imagine. Thank you.
Thanks. It's a tough job, but I love it.
I'm glad. That's what'll keep you at it, is that you love it, because only love could keep you at something like that. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Let's get Thorsten on here next, okay?
Hello, my name is Thorsten Walch. I'm from Germany. I'm a writer and a journalist, and I translate books. And in the last year, I had the huge honor to translate this book into German. So this is the German version of DeForest Kelley, Up Close and Personal, written by Chris. I worked on that some 20 years ago, because we wanted to get the translation very much earlier. We came to know each other in about 2002, and in that time we had the idea to make a German version of the book, but we couldn't find an editor then. And a few years ago, I came to know Björn Sülter, who is the owner of In Farbe und Bunt. That's a German publishing company. And I started working for In Farbe und Bunt. And one day I offered my translation of the book to Björn, and Björn said, okay, we're going to publish it. And I had to get started again, because there was a new edition of the book in the meantime, and I had started to translate the original version, DeForest Kelley, My Life and Times with a Remarkable Gentleman Actor. But it wasn't a problem. It was fun all over. On this occasion, I want to say hi to Björn, if he's listening right now. Björn and Reinhard also, were the three of us, Reinhard Prahl, Björn Sülter, and myself. We are writing the Star Trek Chronicles, books about the Star Trek TV shows. There's a book about every single one. That's another project I'm working on. And I just want to say hi to my friends and colleagues.
Okay. I'll have some photos to show you when we get into this a little more deeper. But first, we'll have everybody introduce themselves. Hannah, why don't you introduce yourself? I'll get you, if I can get you to come up on a solo here. There we go.
Hi, my name's Hannah. Chris and I have been friends for, how long would you say, a couple years now?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, but we met in person back in October. I've been part of this since almost the beginning. Chris wanted me to come on for a practice, and then decided that I was going to be put on.
She
Do you remember that?
An acting family, and she's got acting chops and that kind of stuff. And I was such a newbie; I was terrified. She helped nursemaid me through the thing, and she's been with me ever since. I love it. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay, and let's do this again, and come down to Michael Okuda. Oh, you're turn on your mic. There you go.
Okay, obviously technology is not my forte. My name is Michael Okuda. I'm a Star Trek fan from way back, and I love it so much that I somehow persuaded them to hire me, and I worked on a whole bunch of Star Treks, including a few with everybody's favorite Doctor.
Yes, and tell them what you do on Star Trek. I know everybody. I think everybody knows.
I was the lead graphic designer on Star Trek from Star Trek 4 through the end of Star Trek Enterprise, including all the films during that period. Recently returned to, I helped out a tiny bit with Discovery and, excuse me. Discovery and a bunch of those productions. But I was hired on staff for the, season 2 and season 3 of Picard, which was an enormous amount of fun because production designer Dave Glass really wanted to pay homage to the Star Trek that we all grew up with, not just the original series, but Next Generation and all those things. And if you've seen Star Trek Picard season 3, which I strongly urge you to do, the conclusion of the season and the conclusion of the series it reunites the Next Generation cast on the Enterprise D bridge. And for anyone who's grown up with that show, who loved those adventures, it was quite an extraordinary thing. But I was lead graphic designer for most of those times. I did control panels and readouts in alien languages and other peculiar stuff. I occasionally, as the resident fan on the show, would occasionally try to get stuff in that really wasn't part of my job.
One moment.
Hello, what was that all about? Okay, keep going.
I don't know. Was that you or is that me?
No.
Still working.
I think my phone is talking to me.
Sounds like a computer.
Something like.
Yeah. Okay. It was my phone was pocket dialing.
So tell them you just recently received an award.
Denise and I were honored with the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Art Directors Guild, which was quite an extraordinary thing. We just, graphic designers are pretty far down the food chain. So when we got the call, we were pretty tickled. But
well, your fans were totally tickled. I'll tell you what.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind of you. But I wanted to tell you, as one of the resident fans on the show, during Star Trek 6, the Undiscovered Country, I called a prop maker friend of mine, Steve Horsch, who makes these beautiful, or the late Steve Harsh, who made these gorgeous original series style props. And I had no budget, but I called Steve, and Steve was a fan. So I said, "Hey, Steve, do you think you could make for me an original series style Dr. McCoy hypospray?" And he said, "Sure." So he sent me. This wasn't the one he sent me, but it was one just like it.
Oh, wow.
So I went to the producer's office. I went to Ralph Winter's office. I said, "Hey, Ralph, in the scene where McCoy is trying to save Chancellor Gorkon after the assassination, do you think I can give this," and the actual one that we use, not this one, to the prop master, and have him get D. Kelley to use it in that scene? So Ralph says, "Sure." That morning, I made it a point. You're during a film, you're always running around doing 150 different things, trying to get stuff ready for whatever's shooting next. But I made it a point to sit on stage while D. Kelley was shooting the scene with trying to save Gorkon. And filmmaking is a very slow process, and you're doing this thing over and over and over again.
Yes, it is.
And it's at some point, someone called me and said, "Can you go over to the next stage and do something, whatever it might be?" So I actually missed the moment when they shot that. So if you look at the movie, you know that normally you operate it this way. D. Kelley operated it this way. So he must have forgotten how we used it in the series. So he accidentally injected himself. But the interesting thing is, there are actors who know how to effortlessly convey that they know what they're doing, that they're competent. And D. Kelley was great at that.
Yeah.
And so even though he's holding the damn thing backwards, you absolutely bought it because he carried that expertise so effortlessly.
Were you there when the lighting above D and the ambassador shattered and fell down and darn near hit D in the shoulder and almost cut Christopher Plummer? Were you there when that happened?
If I was, I don't recall it.
Oh, I would think you would have recalled it. So I think probably maybe you were off doing that thing at the same time. He was really, really, really frightened by that because it could have killed them both.
What set was it?
I don't know what set it was, but he was trying to save the ambassador, and the lighting that was lit above them shattered, broke, exploded or something, and the shards of glass came down, hit him on the shoulder, and Christopher Plummer, right next to his head, a big shard, stuck into the table right next to his head. And he said, "Oh boy, oh boy." Yeah.
Well, that doesn't happen very often, but that does happen occasionally.
Okay, so Amy has been our guest many times, and there you go, Amy, and she will be again.
Hello. So well, I'll keep it brief. So I'm Amy Ulen, a computer science K-12 consultant teacher for my district, a huge Star Trek fan, and I have been on an episode of Star Trek Enterprise, and just my love and passion of Star Trek is very deep.
And you're in Of Gods and Men.
Yep.
And you're on the board of the NichelleNichols.Foundation.
Yep, along with Larry.
Yes.
Yeah. So hello, everyone in the chat. Great to see you all here.
All righty. And Dan, let's get you up here on the big screen. Come on, let's do this. Why is it not doing it?
Maybe it wants me to stay little, because I am little,
I just don't know. There we go.
There we go. Hi, everybody. My name is Dan, and I'm good friends with a couple of people on this show here. I've known Chris for a long time, but I've know Mike Okuda and Larry Nemecek for a long, long time. They're both dear friends of mine. I started a fan club back in '79 when Star Trek: The Motion Picture came out. Just a little Xerox newsletter type of thing. And I was ambitious and wanted to make it better and better. And so I started going from Xerox to printing and got copies into the hands of Gene Roddenberry, who became a good friend and actually complimented me on a lot of the different issues I would send him. It was right around the Wrath of Khan time period when I got a cease and desist letter from Paramount Studios licensing telling me, hey, you're doing this without a license. And I said, well, I'm just a kid in my mom and dad's basement putting this together. But they said, well, you have the right amount of fanaticism mixed with the right amount of professionalism. Why don't you fly out here and let's talk about making you a licensee and an official Star Trek fan club. And
Wow.
So Gene Roddenberry was on board. He says, absolutely, this is the guy, I love him, let's do it. Became official and kept doing the fan club for quite a few years, for many, many years, actually. At one point later on, hired Larry as the editor of our Star Trek Communicator magazine, and some of the best magazines I think we ever did were under Larry's command. And met Mike in Hawaii for the first time. I think Mike that's when we first met.
Yes.
And had a great chat and got to meet and know him very well. And I've known Dee for so many years. Back in the early days, I would send him my newsletters, and without fail, he would send me a letter almost every issue, thanking me for sending him the copies and how much he enjoyed them. And he and Carolyn were both big fans of what we were doing. And somewhere along the way, we happened to meet at a convention here in Denver he was at. And that's when I interviewed him in person for the first time. We kind of struck up a friendship. And after that, I would see him off and on and correspond via the mail. They invited me to their house one time, and I came out there and had dinner with them. And two of the sweetest, nicest people I've ever known. And Chris, when you decided to put this show together and you asked me, without hesitation, I was not only because, Chris, I love what you do, and I know that you were dear friends with Dee and Carolyn, but I really can honestly say, and I've got to know many of the various production people and actors that have been involved with Star Trek and other properties for that matter. Dee Kelley is hands down my favorite person I've ever gotten to know in the entertainment industry. He was a gentleman through and through. I literally cried when the day he passed away, because it was losing a friend, not just an actor who I admired, who played a character that I absolutely loved, but it was a real devastating blow to him to have passed away. So I'm honored to be on the show with all these great people, and we can share our memories and thoughts and our love of Dee. That's why I'm here. I love Dee.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that's why we're all here. And we have more. You sent me some pictures, which I'll share in a few. And so did Larry. Let me have Larry introduce himself first, though, before we do that. And anything you leave out, Larry, I'm going to tell about you. So you better do it all. Let's see. Now, why aren't you? Come on. I'm having this same. And you're also mute. You need to unmute yourself, Larry.
All right.
Come on, let's make this thing happen. I wonder why it's doing this for this last two. There we go. Now, let me get you. Come on. I'm clicking like crazy, but it's not doing it. You want to just go ahead and I'll keep
I
trying?
was going to say, I can hold my little corner here just fine.
Okay. I'll keep trying to get you.
No, that's funny. No, I can. I lifelong fan of Star Trek also, and been very privileged to work in some of the professional adjacent arms, because I was a trained journalist and I have an acting directing degree also. And I was also suffering from, as a kid. Today we'd say nerdy, geeky, but back when I was a kid, it was like you had a lot of hobbies, model building and all that. But no, I found Star Trek. I came at Star Trek as a big history buff and as a big NASA kid, I always say. And Star Trek kind of satisfied the itch for both of those in a weird way that I didn't think about until later. But after school reruns is my era. And I grew up in the middle of the country in Oklahoma. And after a few weeks and months, and you were totally bitten with this show, and it was right in the first golden era of the tech manual and the medical reference and the blueprints, and it was all starting to blossom. And even a year or two before Star Wars came on the scene. But after a while, I've always been a defender of the underdog, I guess. And after a while, watching people talk about Star Trek, and even going down to get the commercial, you're a kid, so you want a poster and you want a T-shirt and those first symbols of your fandom. And it got me how everything was, and I was reading, I knew, but everything was Kirk or Spock or the Enterprise or Kirk and Spock or the whole crew. And after a while, I thought, well, why is there nothing for Dr. McCoy? Why is there nothing for Scotty and all the cast? So it kind of became a mission. And I've got I still have it, but the funniest thing was I wanted Dr. McCoy on a T-shirt. The first time I was able to get, D as Dr. McCoy at all was an iron-on from Lincoln Enterprises, which was, Gene and Magel's mailer company. And the first piece of anything I had with DeForest Kelley's face on it was a clip from Patterns of Force, which is it's Spock and McCoy in the closet right after Bones seems in.
Yes.
I didn't think about it until like 10 years ago. It was like, oh, the first piece of Star Trek wearable I had, they're all Nazis. It's like, well, but that was the first thing I could get with these. Now, thankfully, within a year or two or three, that changed. And my next T-shirt was McCoy trying to teach Spock the Vulcan hand salute, standing in the hangar bay door, and returning to Babel. But anyway, that's kind of where it goes back to. But as people got you watch the same 80 shows 47 times, and it just dawned on me how, Kirk's the hero and Spock is the hero, and McCoy never got his due. And as you got savvier, you realize that the first season, D's not credited, and then he gets bumped up above the line for the second and third season. And there's a tangible evidence of that. But anyway, as the years went by, and I enjoyed the show, and I was like putting my toe in the water about writing and just enjoying it. I just got the feeling that of all that cast, I enjoyed all the characters, and I'm sure I've enjoyed meeting all the actors, and eventually did. But I just always had that feeling that D was the one that I would actually, they say about politicians, you'd want to have a beer with. D is the one I just really wanted to sit down and have dinner with at some point. And what became almost comical was that as I baby stepped into the professional side of Star Trek, but through the 80s and fandom, and making the leap from living in the Midwest and then coming to LA when I was privileged to write the Next Generation companion, the making of book, and then go on and do several things, including work with Dan on the Communicator. It became a comedy of errors because I was supposed to meet Dee several times and it didn't happen. I was supposed to go to convention and got sick. I was supposed to go to I was going to meet him at the Con of Wrath at the Ultimate Fantasy, and that blew. I mean, I was there, but his participation kind of blew up. But I finally did, and some of the treasure. I sent you some pictures, but anyway,
yes, I will show them. Yes,
for the first 10 years or so, it was like I'm never gonna. And as I watched him in movies, he was like his waistline was just gradually getting. It was like he was wasting away, and I wasn't going to get to meet him before, but I finally did, and had a wonderful conversation with him, and got to tell him. As a professional, and even pitched, because he was the only actor, he was the last one and the only one that did not do his own autobiography, obviously.
Right.
And our friend Terry Rio did that finally, and then you've got your books too. But I actually pitched doing his biography with him when I met him at the. We finally had a conversation in an actual interview at the 30th anniversary in '96. And okay, I'll tell you. So we did our interview. And it's the first time I had talked to him before in another funny story, but I was in LA now and working in the franchise. And we did our bit. And as I ended, I said, well, now I can tell you, Dee. I said, from the very beginning, I said, I've always loved the show, loved all the characters, and loved everything Star Trek since. But in the beginning, you were my favorite. And I said, we're finally doing this. Oh, this is from that meeting. I said, you've always been my favorite. McCoy has always been my favorite. This is so long overdue, and it's just been a pleasure to talk to you. And he said, oh, well, where were you 20 years ago when I did you with Dee and Bill? But then I said, but
I was working at it.
I said, I said, that was great. I said, having said that, that was like in the little interview room. I said, having said that, look, you're the only one without your biography. I said, I'm in Burbank now. Let me come over. Let's work on your biography. Let's get that done. You're the only one that hasn't done one yet. And he looked at me and he said, now, if I did that, I'd have to go out the garage and go through all those boxes. Which was his way of saying, and I don't know if Terry had talked to them by then or not. This was 96.
No.
But that was his way of going, somebody else is going to have to deal with it. And of course, you'll know when he was diagnosed with his cancer. I don't think it was then, or maybe it was early. I don't know. But anyway, it was his way of, I was disappointed, obviously. And then within a couple of years, he passed 3 years later.
Yeah.
And we knew, and then Terry's book came out and it was awesome. And she included me in it, a couple of smidgens, along with all the real people in Dee's life. Mm-hmm. But I'll never forget. Sophia was kind of like the culmination of that, and through a couple of other experiences, but that were kind of funny that he wouldn't remember. But I'll always remember that. And so, but I wasn't lying. But that was his attitude. That humility.
Yes.
Through everything.
Absolutely.
And it served him in the battles of that caste dynamic. It served him well.
I tried to get him to even do it on a tape recorder. I said, Carolyn, can't you just turn on a tape recorder and ask him questions? She said, oh, if I did that, he'd clam right up, Mm-hmm. And then when he was in the hospital, he gave me permission to do the bio. Well, I am not a bio writer at all. And I knew that Terry Rio had done a wonderful biography of another gentleman, and that Bill Moyer was a big fan of hers for what she had done. And I knew she hadn't met him, which was kind of important. If you're going to be an historian, you have to be a little bit, above the fray and you can't, she was a fan, but she had not met him. Mm-hmm. So I said, I would like you to do the biography. And I gave her all of the names that he had given me of his boyhood friends who were still alive, people he'd served in the armed services with and everything like that. I said, you go do that and I'll go do I'm an anecdotal writer. I'm not an historian. I'm a storyteller. Mm-hmm. So we both did our thing, and the books are very different. It's like apples and oranges, but it's like bookends.
No, they complement each other really well.
They really, very, very little duplication at all, except where she quoted me or something like that. But I'm going to stay with you, Larry, for a moment, because here are some of the things he sent you, and you want to go ahead and.
Well, you should show that picture of him.
Show the other one here. Yeah. There he's signing.
The time I finally got to meet Dee, and everybody's got our stories. I don't want to hog the time here, but I finally got to meet Dee at Space Trek in 1984 in St. Louis. We drove up. There were a lot of Hart Bennett and George and Majel and Jimmy and Dee were all guests, and I was finally getting to go to a real con that something didn't blow up about it for me. And there were so many people. It was at an indoor pool motel, the Henry VIII, I think. And had an indoor, but it was summer and it was so humid inside and everybody was miserable. And the line was so long, they all lined up, all five of them at one table. And it went so slow that Majel, Jimmy, and Dee started walking the line to sign for people. But I had taken my medical reference and I didn't know at the time that was unusual. But mm-hmm. I asked him, I said, would you sign it just a country doctor? And he did. And I found out later on that pretty soon after this, he stopped, doing extra personalizing like that on signatures. But this is like one of the, then 2 years later, so this was like a prize moment for me. But I was like, okay, if I drop dead tomorrow, if he does, I've finally met Dee. And that's like about as pure a fan thought as you can have. Right? Yeah. So, and then 2 years later, there's a whole, and this was the photo I had him sign. So now I've got my official, fan photos, fine service. signed of him. And then 2 years later, at that same convention, he was back with Nichelle, and it was the summer of Star Trek 4, Mike's first gig. And it was weird because they had, by that time I realized working at a newspaper, I could go as a press and I could deduct the cost of the trip. And this whole world was like opening up to me. And they had a press conference, and Leonard was supposed to be there, but he didn't come down. So they had a room reserved. They had local press. They had a lot of fans that had got into the back of the room. It was kind of funny. And I was standing there, and all these bored local 20-something news crews were set up, like you could see 3 or 4 cameras, and then a lot of press people, and then some fans sitting in the back. And Nichelle came in right off the plane, and she had her hat on because she hadn't done her hair. And it was the summer of Star Trek 4, so the whole world knew the plot, but they weren't officially going to talk about it. I'm sorry. Before Nichelle came in, people were standing around bored, and Dee came in. There was no host from the convention, nobody running the thing. And I was standing there, and Dee stuck his head in, like, am I in the right place? And he saw this table, and he saw camera. So he kind of ambled over, and he kind of halfway expected somebody to welcome him or introduce him or something. And he kind of looked around, and I was standing there, and I finally said, "It's dead, Dee." And then he said, "It's dead." I was like, that was the cue. And he said, "It's dead, Jim." And then everybody, all these sleepy 20-somethings at their cameras went, "Oh, is something happening? Is something going on?" And they were like, "Oh, I guess this is the guy." And it was 86, and nobody knew. There were no fans soaking into the industries by then of anything, so. But the fans in the back were like, oh. So I felt like, once again, I was this mediator between fandom, entertainment, and journalism, which is kind of the niche I had.
Yeah. Okay.
And I started off, and then Nichelle came in and joined them a little later. So that's another moment that and then at the end, and Carolyn was there with him. And at the end, I said, I'd love to sit down and do a personal interview. And Carolyn said, "Okay, I'll help make." I met her, and I said, "I'll make it happen. I'll make it happen." And then, as it broke up, and he came back to her, she said, "Dee, this is Larry Nemecek." And he went about that time. About 3 little fangirls came over and said, "Mr. D, DeForest, can we interview for our fan club magazine?" I mean, I would have done it for our paper. And he said, "Now, girls, if I tell you yes, then I'll have to do every request here, and I don't think I have time." And about that time, Carolyn looked at me like, "Oh, crap. Okay, so I'm sorry." She looked at me silently, and I was like, okay, it's okay. So anyway, that's way too much personal saga, but those are my two personal D stories. That's all I got, because he was the first of the cast to pass. And my arc of being out here and talking to everybody for firsthand, interviewing.
And you sent me this image, these 4 images.
So I don't know if these are. These are. I came across these, but this is D. You see. Shatner, and you see even Nimoy getting into, and Scotty have been published, but I'd never seen images of Dee being put into makeup for Deadly Years. So anyway, I just was going to share those. It's a 4-shot.
Okay, and here's a
That's
photo you
just
took
a
of
convention
him.
picture of me. He was the other guest in Denver. Dan will remember this maybe, when it was Patrick Stewart's first convention.
Yes, I was there too.
In March of '88.
Yes.
And Dee was the other guest. Anyway, this is from that same weekend.
Yep, I remember.
He was
that weekend was really cool. I don't know. It wasn't that weekend. On another weekend, the first time Brent Spiner ever was going to do a Star Trek convention, he was nervous as hell. He just did. He had walked into this iconic thing. And I mean, he was a comic, and he was an actor, and he was a professional already, but he did not know what to expect. And he was a nervous wreck, and he came up to Dee and said, oh my God, I'm just a nervous wreck." And he said, "Why?" And he said, "I just don't know what they expect." "Well, what do I do?" And Dee said, "Just love them." Just love them. And that's what he's been doing ever since, you know, because they love you. Just love them. He had a really good way of just telling you what you needed to know, and in a really good, just love them.
Well, and that's what transcended through. I mean, I was going to say the thing that I finally realized why I enjoyed McCoy more. Everybody else was heroic and heroic, and I just always felt like McCoy
was every man.
Out loud. McCoy was like, "Oh my God, we all put our pants on the same way. We're just out here doing our jobs." Everybody's calm, and that's why people call McCoy a curmudgeon, which I guess is true. But he never. All the memes and stereotypes about McCoy, not Dee so much, but McCoy. Right. To me, McCoy was the one that settled everybody down, poked holes in all the bubbles,
Yeah.
Kept everybody human or Vulcan or whatever.
Right.
And was just out there to keep everybody level-headed. And,
absolutely. Beautiful,
and
beautiful
occasionally
description.
got the spotlight for himself, but otherwise
Right.
just kept everybody else on
He
their
was just happy to be part of the party, I think he would have liked more, screen time, but he was just such a good ensemble actor.
D was definitely happy to be part of the party.
Yes. And then there's one more picture you had of him and A.C. Lyles that you say this was his last appearance?
This is not my photo. They gave A.C. Lyles, who was a longtime legendary producer at Paramount, and they were best friends.
Uh-huh.
And this was from 98, like the fall of 98. And I was told later on that this was the last, and this is when D was very sick.
Mm-hmm.
But I was told later on that this is the last public event that D went to before he passed next summer, June of 99.
Okay.
So this was like about 9 months before he passed.
All right.
I'm saying.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Let me go ahead and get Dan up here because I have some photos that Dan sent me too. If I can get it to, I guess I removed him. I don't want to remove him. Okay. Okay, it's not going to let me.
Madsen.
It's not going to let me do the enlarging. I don't know if Roger can help me from behind the scenes or what, but it's not letting me do any of that anymore. So, Dan, you want to go ahead and I'll put up some of the photos you sent me if I can find
Sure.
Here's the one I showed to say who was coming on. That's a picture of you. Here's a picture of you and D.
Yep. That's
right.
I have that in color. Actually, that was at the first meeting we had in person. That was at a convention in Denver here called StarCon. And, we felt like we knew each other before this because I had actually interviewed him on the phone and we wrote letters back and forth. But this was the very first time we met face to face. And Carolyn was there and she took this picture. They had just finished breakfast, and so he had a bit of time before he had to be up on stage, and so it was a perfect time for me to come in and do another interview with him. And he was always just so gracious and so friendly and so approachable. I think that's what impressed me most about D. And after we got to know each other, he and Carolyn sent us a gift when I got married, a beautiful crystal vase. And he sent me invitations to his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And I don't know, just so many other things and actually one of my treasured items is he sent me one of the little miniature star pins with his name on it, that they got when they got their star on the wall.
Oh,
that was a fun. And this was my favorite letter. I just posted this a while ago on Facebook. In one of my interviews I did with him, I said to him, I said, well, how would you like to be remembered? Or, what do you think people will say about you when you're gone? And he says, and he just kept thinking about it and thinking about it. He goes, I really don't know. He says, I'll have to get back to you on that. And so I sent him the issue and he sent me this wonderful little note back, how much he liked it, how impressed he was with the quality and such. And then he says, he says in response to that question you asked me, he goes, I guess what I would expect people to say about me when I'm gone is he's dead, Jim. Yeah.
I remember that period of time really, really well because I actually responded to the communicator and you published what I wrote in response to that. He's dead, Jim. But what was in the communicator before that he finally responded to, how would you like to be remembered? He said, well, first of all, and he kind of laughed kind of self-consciously, I hope people will remember. There's nothing deader. There's nothing deader than a dead actor.
That's right.
He said, I really don't know. I expect that's something somebody else will have to answer. That's what we're doing today. We are answering that today.
Yes, we are.
And will be. Those of us who knew him.
Such wonderful memories of the man. And, that came through in his portrayal of Dr. McCoy on Star Trek. And he was always one of my favorite characters. And it was such a delight when you finally get to meet the actor that they turn out to be even better than you would have hoped and expected.
Yes.
And so I'm always happy and elated to talk with anybody about DeForest Kelley, because he's just one of the most special people I think that ever came into my life. And I'm, and I always keep saying, when I say about Dee, I add Carolyn as well, because Carolyn was just as magnificent as Dee was.
Absolutely.
And I know, Chris, you know that very well. Yeah. So, yeah.
I want to put this up too, because this is you as Alexander.
Yep. From Free Enterprise, a movie that longtime fans Mark Altman made, and that's me and Bill Shatner there talking behind the scenes on while we were filming this scene that I happened to have a cameo in, and he's doing a rap music scene up on stage. That particular the fact that I'm Alexander in this is why and it goes back, and I've told this story many times, but just briefly, the whole, I feel like Star Trek, there was fate that brought me together with Star Trek, because when I was about 11, 12 years old, I think it was, I was walking home from school that day, and as kids can be, they can be cruel sometimes, and I'm a little person, I'm only 4'2", I look a little different. So I was walking home from school that day, and there were a couple of boys that were following me home, and they were making fun of me and calling me freak and midget and shrimp and such. And this was, my school was about 4 blocks away, so I had to endure this the whole way home. Finally, I got home, and as I walked in the door, I have tears streaming down my cheek because I was, distraught over this. And my brother was home watching TV, and so I sat down in front of him, and lo and behold, what was he watching? But he was watching Star Trek.
Plato's Stepchildren.
Oh
my God! Talk about
never watched Star Trek, nor had any interest in watching Star Trek, but I, for some reason, sat down that day, and that episode was on, and it was only within a few minutes, and all of a sudden, here comes this little character who looked like me, and I thought, wow, I mean, he really does kind of look like me, and it was like a light bulb going off, and suddenly my interest was just zoomed in on this TV show. And it was not long after that there's the point in the show where Alexander looks up to Kirk and says, what's it like where you come from? And Kirk looks at him and says, Alexander, where I come from, size, shape, or color makes no difference. And I swear to you, it was like a light bulb going off in my head. That I still have the hair stand up on the back of my neck when I say that, because that moment is probably when we all look back at our lives and you say, what was a big turning point in your life? For me, that was it. That moment watching that television show. And then at the end, of course, when he gets to beam up to the Enterprise, and I got to thinking, wow, what I wouldn't give to just be able to beam up to the Enterprise with these guys and not be judged by what I look like, but by the content of my character. And I started watching Star Trek every day after that, became just passionate about it.
Plastic you got me crying.
And and one of the real thrills was that one of the times I got to interview Bill Shatner, I went out to his office in LA and I got to tell him that story.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like came full circle,
mm-hmm.
Getting to be able to tell the actor who said those lines, how this all affected me and changed my life forever. And so, yeah, that's in a nutshell, that's how I got involved in Star Trek.
Something very similar happened to me at a Star Trek convention I was at, that Dee was at, because there was, they always have these costume contests. And up until then, whenever I saw people in a wheelchair or people on crutches or people who in some way diverged from what we're used to seeing, I wouldn't look at them. I would think, oh, they'll think I'm looking at them if I look at them, you know? I didn't want anybody to feel uncomfortable because I looked at them, And there was this gal in a wheelchair, and she said, my God, I didn't know whether to come as Captain Pike or a Horta, so I could incorporate my wheelchair. And it was at that moment I went, oh my gosh, how would you like to be not looked at all? I mean, to be totally ignored because, and from that moment on, I said, no, people are people, no matter what they look like, no matter who they are, no matter what their circumstances or challenges are. They are human beings. Look at them.
That's
And
right.
from that moment on, it was like, I'm going to look at people, you know?
Yep. That's very
Um,
true. That's very
and,
true. Star
and
Trek
you-
teaches a lot of important lessons. In fact,
Star Trek really did teach lots of great stuff. I'm going to come back to Mike if I don't accidentally delete him again. Okay. I don't know what's going on here. Mike, can you hear me?
I can hear you well.
Okay. Did you have some more you wanted to say? You didn't send me any photos, so I'm not.
Well, first of all, I wanted to mention to Dan, I think I've mentioned it before, that Free Enterprise is one of my very, very favorite Star Trek movies.
yes,
And-
very favorite Star Trek movie. That's right, Mike.
And when Denise and I first saw it, and we saw you on screen, we both cheered.
Wow. Awesome.
I wanted
Well, I watched. Okay.
Go
Go
wanted
ahead.
to say, I really didn't do much more than say good morning to D. Kelley, because when you're working on a movie, you're always running in 100 different directions.
Right.
But the first Star Trek movie I worked on was Star Trek 4, and I never expected to get hired onto a second Star Trek movie. This was Star Trek fan getting to work on Star Trek, soak it all in. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. Just enjoy it. And one of the rituals in filmmaking, not so much now because you have streaming, but back then, once a day they would screen the previous day's footage at the Paramount Theater, and it was usually during lunchtime because otherwise everybody's working. And I was like, again, graphic artist, you're pretty far down the food chain. Mm-hmm. But on one particular day, I asked for permission to go to dailies, and it was the day that we're seeing the footage of the reveal of the new Enterprise. So Paramount had a small theater that they used for this sort of thing, and it was Ralph Winter, Harv Bennett, Nick Meyer, I guess Leonard. I remember Gene wasn't there, but the point is, not many people there. Mm-hmm. And when you shoot a scene like that one, it's a very brief scene. But first, you shoot a relatively wide shot of everybody, then you shoot a slightly closer shot, and then you shoot a tighter shot. Then you shoot individual shots of the different actors, and you shoot different things. And if you figure 2 or 3 takes on each one, you can see how even a 20-second scene can take you all morning to shoot. And I'm at first I'm going, oh, these guys are on the Enterprise, and not only that, it's an Enterprise that I helped to design and build. So I'm thrilled out of my little brain.
Yes.
And then I realized I should be watching the actors, and I specifically noticed in that moment, as Kirk is and Spock is imperious, that D. Kelley playing Dr. McCoy was very relaxed. He was in the moment, going, "Yeah, hey, we're on the Enterprise," and very, very casual and very likable. But then I noticed, and he would sit there and he'd look down and he'd look up and he'd shift his weight from one foot to the other, and just very, very natural. But then I realized every single take, he looked down at the same moment, he looked up at the same moment, he smiled at the same moment, he shifted his weight from the same moment, so that the editor would not have to worry about matching between this shot and then this shot. And I know those of you who have a background in acting, this is in film acting, this is something that you do all the time and it comes natural. But to a kid on his first movie, I'm going, wow, that's a skill that I never realized. And he just made it so effortless, and you just go, yeah, that's my pal, Dr. McCoy.
Wow. Wow. Okay, let me see.
Hey, Chris,
Yes.
I actually have a follow-up question to Mike's
Okay,
story
please
because
do.
that's
If you have questions, ask.
yeah, and same with the chat. If you have
Yes.
questions, just put them in the chat.
We've
But
got comments like crazy that I need to get into because I'm
right. So my wonder is, Chris, did you see any of Dee's scripts? Like, I would love to know, like, how detailed his actor notes were about things like that, about where and when he was going to make each movement. So do you have any of those?
I did not. I did not see those. No. Let's see. Let's get.
Larry, you're muted.
I was going to say, why do I feel like maybe it's been 20 years plus? Maybe those have all long since gone off into auctions, or
I think they probably
or
have.
he did that while he was with us.
A lot of times he would donate things, to charities and stuff, so that they could make money too. Yeah. So I'm gonna come to Thorsten real quick because Thorsten sent me some photos too. And I don't believe I've showed those yet. Whoops. Let me come back here. And then I'm going to get into comments because I'm sure we have questions, comments, and all kinds of stuff going on. Get up here. There we are. Oh, I want Thorsten to talk about this at a convention recently. And of course, you're. In German, that says, "Have you seen this man? He saved my life."
That's a friend of mine. Her name is Melanie. And she dressed up as the nice young lady Dee saved on Star Trek 4. She's a cosplayer. She did many really magnificent cosplays, but that one, for me personal, it was the highlight of her cosplays. I told her so, and this was on last FedCon in Bonn. About 3 weeks ago on the Sunday of FedCon, and she showed up at our stand, and I said, I got to get a photo of that, and you have to hold the book in your hand, the book about you. And so she did. It's adorable. It's great.
And great. This is her. Also,
this is her when she's not the nice young lady from Star Trek 4.
And here's a picture of Thorsten. Doesn't he look like an author here? He does that one real good.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Thorsten, go ahead and tell us about your interactions with Dee, and I will then show some photos.
First of all, I got to say I've been a huge fan of DeForest Kelley ever since I saw the very first Star Trek episode, because there is no because it happened. I saw him and he was the one. Kirk was cool and Spock was cool and Uhura was lovely, but Dee was Dee, and I never could afford in the 1980s to get to the States to a convention. It's been a time where I simply didn't have the money. I didn't work then already, and long story. And one day we have a guy here in Germany. His name is Winfried Bornemann, and this guy Bornemann is a journalist who wrote letters to different huge companies begging for free stuff, and he always got free stuff. I think the biggest thing he got was a car. Even he wrote to some car company, and they gave him a car for free because he wrote there. And this guy Bornemann published a book with addresses of favorite people, actors and writers. Even the address of Stephen King was inside there and stuff like that. And I got that book coincidentally because I never thought I would get one. When I heard that book would come out, I thought they will take it from the market. Because all of the addresses he had published. And in that book, I found the address of DeForest Kelley, the private address. And in that time, I would never would never do such a thing today. I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, and there wasn't much research on that kind of disease in that time, and I didn't feel very well. And so I wrote a letter to DeForest Kelley and told him about being sick, and that thinking of him gave me hope, because I had heard he was sick by himself and had recovered, and I wrote him stuff like that, and I sent that letter to him, and I never ever expected to get an answer. And it was only 3 or 4 days later when a letter arrived, and he sent me an autographed photograph, and yeah, that one, and sending me good wishes. I believed I was in the middle of a dream. I showed it to my mother back then, and I said, "Just look at that." My mother looked at it and said, "That's impossible. That cannot be true. And oh, what a cute guy he is." Yeah, that was the first thing, and yeah, that one that was a few years later. I got married in 1995, and I still am today. And in the same year, DeForest and his wife had their 50th anniversary, and we sent them a card. And I put some photographs of our wedding along with the card, because we had our wedding in Star Trek uniforms. And the same thing happened again. DeForest Kelley wrote a letter by hand to us, as you can see, and put that trading card, that autographed trading card, which is almost unaffordable without any signature today, put that along. And I believe this time I went to the floor when I did like, yeah, I never met him in person, but that was my interaction with him.
And Tarson actually contributed to my book, The Enduring Legacy of DeForest Kelley, actor, healer, friend, because I reached out to a lot of people, I think on the 15th anniversary of Dee's passing, and wanted to have other fans' experiences with him. And I put out a book about that, and his full story is in there if you want to hear the full story. Also, recently he got...
Yeah, the Dickies. You all know the story. I think Chris decided on selling some of the stuff he got from DeForest, and I asked if I could have something too, something that was his, and so Chris sent me those Dickies, and
I mean, it's the least I could do. You translated my book, and you didn't charge me a dime.
And wrote to me just to wear them, and I did so. First I didn't dare.
Do you have a picture of you? Do you have a picture of you in one of them?
I do have, but I cannot reach it from here.
Okay.
I posted it on Facebook. I wore the black one. I wore in Dortmund on the Comic-Con in early May, and the red one I wore on FedCon.
Okay, let's send it.
I read from the book there both times. I read from the book there, and I wore the Dickies by then. And people were like, "Oh, may I touch it?" And I said, "No, you must not. Just look at some photographs, but don't touch it, nobody." And I had to dry it afterward, because it was so hot those days, and they were. I did a. Yeah, they got wet. I was sweating, and then I had to dry them under the table where the books lay. I put it there and let it dry before I.
Now you're mixing DNA with D. There you go.
Yes, I said now I can clone my own D, maybe.
Okay, let's come to Amy. Amy
All
missed
right.
an opportunity. Amy missed an opportunity to meet Dee.
Yes. So I lived in Moscow, Idaho at the time, and creation conventions would come through Spokane, Washington, and Dee was scheduled to be at one of the conventions. And so I was very excited going up for it. And unfortunately, at the last minute, he had to cancel because of his illness. And so I never did get to meet him. But then eventually at a Seattle convention, I got to meet Chris, which to me was the next best thing. So that has been a great friendship ever since then. But one of the things that these various stories are really bringing up for me is the fact that he would write letters. And my wonder is, today, would actors, like, do we know of any actors that would actually do that today?
At one point, I actually, I mean, even when he was sick, he was getting letters, and he wanted to answer these letters. And I'm like, actually, even before I knew he was sick, he's beginning to mention that, my God, I get so many letters in here. He said, sometimes I'm just signing photos instead of answering letters, but I read them all. I read them all. Because if anybody takes the time to write to me, I want to read them. The least I can do is send them a photo. I said, Dee, why don't you just do a little form letter saying thank you very much. He says, I would never ever do that to a fan of mine. If they hear from me, they're going to hear from me. It's going to be individual. I'm not going to do. He never would use the auto pen. He said, no. He said, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to either sign a photo or actually write a letter, or dictate to one to Carolyn to type, and then sign it, because he just really felt really, really strongly that if people reached out to him, he wanted to reach back. And I thought that was, another reason I loved him so much. Here I am trying to talk him out of doing the thing that I wouldn't like him to be doing. Why don't you just do that? No. Okay. I'm glad you said that. I'm really glad you said that.
Well, so, Chris, isn't it so that, Dee, we think of it, this stuff about the 80s and the 90s and all, but Dee, he was ready to retire in 65 and 66. Yeah. He thought his whole Western career and the height of his career was over.
Right.
And that's, and he'd had a nice life and had been comfortable and, had some residuals coming in or whatever. But he looked at all of Star Trek as this complete gift out of the blue.
Cream on the coffee.
Right. Yeah. That he'd never expected to have. And so the fact that the most productive and talk about what it will be his legacy, what he'll be remembered for, all of that happened when he thought he was old and washed up and put out to pasture, and it all happened that. So that explains why he was so connected to the fans. It's like, you guys found me when I was about to wander out, into the back.
A fortune teller on Long Beach, when he was a young man, about 22 or 23, there was a fortune teller, and he thought, hey, this is fun. Let's go do this thing. And he went in there and he put his palm out, and she looked at him and she said, not much is going to happen to you until you're about 45 years old. And Cocky D at that time said, I'm going to be retired by the time I'm 45 years old, he thought. And I think he really did expect that. And she was right. Nothing much happened. He was a solid working actor, but he was not a household name. He was not an icon. He was one of thousands of nameless, faceless. Oh, I know that guy. I've seen him in a lot of places, but I don't know his name until Star Trek. And, the fortune teller in that case was right. Before I go to comments, Hannah, are there any questions you want to ask of any of these illustrious folks that we have here?
I guess, what is it about Dee specifically that sticks with each one of you? Like, whether it be who he was as a person, his influence as an actor, anything.
Go ahead, anybody.
His kindness, his generosity. I would have loved Dr. McCoy, irregardless if Dee had turned out to be a jerk when I met him in person. But when I met Dee in person and got to know him, it made the character even more special to me. And I love Dee more than I even do McCoy. because he was such
Amen.
amazing, kind, generous, approachable, warm, and welcoming man who also put you on a pedestal. He always made sure that you felt important. And he would reach out to me without me even saying anything to him. He'd send me a letter and such. So, yeah, he's irregardless of his acting and what a great actor he was, and this character he brought to life, the man himself is what impressed me and has been left with me in my memory more than even the character of Dr. McCoy.
And if you ever tried to put him on a pedestal, he would immediately kick it out from under himself and let, just like what Larry said, we put our pants on one leg at a time. Please don't do that to me.
Yeah, absolutely. The humble man, very humble. He never bragged about anything, He was so humble.
Yeah. Larry, did you get a chance to look at any of his Westerns to have any comments on?
I did. Well, I watched, and I remember in 99 when he passed. And by the way, since Dan mentioned it earlier, I did have this nearby. I had been editor about 6 months when Dee passed. And I was really, I wasn't privy to knowing that he was sick and he had the cancer. I knew for 10 years, he looked like he was slowly, I don't want to say wasting away, but he looked thinner and thinner. And I just had this image of he's getting older and, try to see him or have contact. And then when I came to LA and I was working in professional circles, and all the current shows were taking up a lot of the bandwidth. It was kind of hard. Anyway, when I was at a convention in North Carolina, speak of the devil, there, Michelle, it was at High Point, and he wasn't supposed to be a guest or anything, but Janet and I were guests, and we were about to walk on for the opening ceremonies on the Friday afternoon. It was the Friday that he passed. And of course, it was hitting the wire services and all that. And we were about to walk on for the opening, and it was an old school con with an opening ceremony. And Janet, my wife, who worked on Voyager with the writers, and Lily DeFaggio, anyway, she talked to somebody or had a phone call or something. We had baby cell phones. And she said, come over here. And she pulled me aside from what was this glorified green. Anyway, she sat me down and she said, DeForest Kelley, D. Kelley just died. And I was like, what? And it just hit me. I was like, what? Because he was my, you love the cast, and we had other Treks by then. And I was looking forward to finally sitting down and getting to know him or whatever. Maybe talking him into that book idea after all or whatever, But it just really, so I always loved Janet for doing that. She's like, I didn't want you to go on stage and hear it from a fan.
Yes.
Which is a weird way to think, like little me. But anyway, we were still on a stage, for an audience. And so then when we did go out, I said, I've just heard that DeForest Kelley has passed, and we did a moment of silence and, in his honor. And people gasped because people were still hearing it. It was pre-internet days and people weren't getting alerts on their phones still, or yet. But I always thought it wasn't up to, in my selfishness, it was a cruel thing that I had just gotten this position in place where I could start indulging some of Mike's talking about the thing you enjoy doing, getting to do it for a job. And that he, the first of all, outside of Gene and maybe Mark Leonard, that Dee was the first one to pass of the cast, and he was my favorite. But what that also meant was that my first big memorable issue was getting to do this memory issue. And Dan, do you remember this? We had an issue ready to go. And we totally dropped it. Or we cut it back about half. And in those days it was but we totally dropped everything and threw this memorial issue together.
It is just a fabulous issue. I have like 3 copies of it.
And so it's very bittersweet to me that it was
Larry,
my favorite
you did
issue.
a beautiful job on that issue. I still look at that issue today and so proud of the work you did on that. It is absolutely really well done. Fabulous.
There you go. This is the photo of Dee and Nichelle at that press conference when no one knew who he was.
Wow.
And I kickstarted it for them, kind of. It was fun. It's just funny. Anyway, but it was very bittersweet that I was like, and just like, well, this is the only way this is the last real contact I'm gonna have with him. So we'll do our best.
Yeah. Michelle, did you have any questions or additional comments?
Just pretty much like the more I actually got to read about him, like the more I was like, I never got to meet him. I guess I'm kind of like the younger one of the group, but I never got to meet him, and I was like, oh, he would have been like the one person I wouldn't have mind to sit down and kind of pick his brain a little bit. And like, just the more I read about him, I'm like, he's kind of like me, because I'm kind of the quiet, shy type. And it's just
He was
crazy that
too.
I'm in
He was a quiet, shy
EMS.
type. Uh-huh.
I'm in EMS, and it's a bunch of loud, in a good way, a bunch of loud, rowdy people, and I'm just kind of like the calm, cool, quiet, collected one sitting in the background. But
You're the D
he would
one.
have been the one that I wouldn't mind actually sitting down talking to.
I just want to again let you know how proud he would be of you, and to know that he influenced your decision as a career. I think he would be so proud. I'm proud to know you. Okay, let's jump into the comments, because my goodness, we have about 15 more minutes before Roger's going to kick us off, because I think he has something starting at noon here. We got a lot of hi. Okudagrams. I don't know what that is. Okudagrams. Maybe we can. I'm a doctor, not a technology expert. Okudagrams. I got a whole bunch of that. Okay. Hi, Amy. Welcome back. Hi, Dan and everyone. So many wonderful people. Tia in Russia is sending everybody her love.
Hi, Tia.
Let's see. Thank you, everyone, for coming on and sharing your memories of D. I'm avidly following at 5:30 a.m. in New Zealand. That's Helen.
Wow.
Oh my God, that picture of Dee and Larry. That's a great picture. We have not seen these makeup photos before. This is Tracy Ramos, I think. That's a treasure. Brent Spiner is really hilarious. Yes, he is. Still chuckling about Dan's comment, I'm just a kid in a basement.
Get a life. Get a life, right?
Yeah, speaking about Star Trek 4, I always loved the hospital scene where he gave the old lady a pill and she grew the new kidney. We talked about that. John Bowersox, even though I never met D. Kelley, it's been really fun searching through the internet, finding photos of him. D donated all of his scripts to a group of nuns. I heard that too.
Wow.
Arctic Galaxy says D. Kelley sounds like such a nice guy. I wish I could have met him. Somebody, Crizzy, 1988 says, I saw Torsten with the red one. Yeah. I would say Carl Urban probably go out to it. I invited Carl Urban, but I don't think he got the message. Hopefully I'll see him at another time, because when I met him at Comic-Con 5 years ago, I thought he did such a wonderful job of resurrecting not DeForest Kelley, but Dr. McCoy. That I took a couple of D's scarves up to him for him to choose which one he liked the best. And he did the soliloquy on D. He never got a chance to meet D. But he did the soliloquy on how hard it was for him to think about, I can't mimic him. I can't satirize him. I don't want to do anything that's going to be at all demeaning, but how do I capture that essence of McCoy? And he just did this beautiful thing. And I went, well, you did it. Yes.
Can I say real quick, that's a testament to D right there.
Absolutely.
And D is like one of those actors that all those Western, like he was the bad guy in Westerns, but even when he did some other roles that weren't, and he did little TV roles and his green ones. And McCoy now is branded in our minds for him, but he's one of those actors. And my guy also, Will Rogers, and yes. Terry kind of pointed that out to me when I never thought about it. Like if I enjoyed D and his performance, and Will Rogers the same way, but one of those actors that we take them for granted because, they're just playing themselves. They're just playing themselves in 30 different roles.
Yeah. And
he wasn't, and it just dawned on me, the proof in the pudding here. When the JJ movies came out, I thought one of the strongest points was how well it was cast and how they got good actors to convey all the original role. Without that, and every actor does that, and the audience will sense it too. Are you imitating or are you imbuing? And I thought of all of that cast that did a good job, that Carl Urban and McCoy were the highlight of the group, of him being able to do that. And it just now strikes me that there is a testament to D, because Carl Urban is for all I can tell, is a nice guy, good guy. He's got kids. He's being a good, kind of thing. but he's not DeForest Kelley. The two have
No.
totally different lives and personalities when you get down to it. But what Dee was able to give the world with his performance of McCoy was something that had the right skill set. Somebody like Carl could jump in and do it justice. And I think that's a silent testament to Dee's performance ability.
Absolutely.
You know, he gave people a recipe that you didn't have to be a carbon copy of Dee Kelley to bring off McCoy. And Carl
was a huge Dr. McCoy fan to start with, and that's why he wanted to do the role, and it was so intimidating because it's like, oh my God, how do you do that? How do you try to catch lightning in a bottle twice and do it justice? And I think he just did a fabulous job. Arctic Galaxy says, being a younger Star Trek fan, it's great to hear everyone's stories about Dee Kelley. He died before I was born, so I never got the proper chance to meet him. So it's so nice to hear how much of a wonderful person he was. Maybell 1NC says, in North Carolina says, and after I saw him on Star Trek, I started seeing him in all kinds of old movies, and it bugged me to no end when he was a bad guy. I know he wasn't. Another testament to his acting abilities is it was hard for him at first to get roles as a bad guy because they looked at him and said, you can't be a bad guy. He was just such a mild-mannered, gentle, being. And then he had to actually grab, who was it, Clint Eastwood or somebody by the, shirt. Says, I think I can convince you I am. And it was like, oh, all right, okay then, And then after that, Star Trek, they had a hard time getting him. Nobody's going to believe him as a good guy. He could chew up the scenery as a bad guy. He was really scary. I had nightmares about him as a bad guy, and when I met him, because I had seen him in Westerns and in Star Trek, I didn't know what to expect. And I was a little bit standoffish and a little like, is he going to be Toby Jack Saunders, or is he going to be McCoy, or is he going to be something different? And immediately I could tell, oh no, this is a salt of the earth guy. He is so amazing.
I never answered your question, Chris, but I watched Warlock last night with Henry Fonda and Anthony Quinn, and Dee is like got 8th billing in it.
Yes.
So the 4 leads, and then he's the first card with multiple names, and he's got some memorable scenes. Yeah, one of which was in the memorial reel that they did for his service. Yeah.
Have you seen Apache Uprising?
I wasn't able to access it, but I want to watch, because that's Toby Jack Sanders, right?
That's Toby Jack Saunders.
That's the real. I saw the scene.
Yeah.
He says they fight, then he goes, okay, I've had enough. And then the minute his back's turned, he comes at him again with a chair.
Yeah. Maybell says, I was at the school teaching. It was after school when I found out he had passed. Had the TV on, and I was in my classroom. None of my students were there. I heard that he passed. I sat down and cried. It was the end of the school year, and I was cleaning up my classroom. My dad and I reference McCoy almost every day. McCoy holds a special place in my heart because my dad and I bond over Star Trek when he introduced me to it when I was a kid. It's such an amazing series. Yeah, I've seen Carl talk about him playing the role as Dr. McCoy. Is that everything? I think so. Well, we're wrapping this up just about on time.
Yeah, I do. May I ask Mike about Okudagram? Could you share with everybody what that's all about?
Am I unmuted?
Yeah.
Okay. I was a lead graphic designer on a lot of Star Treks, and during the first season of Next Generation, our set decorator was a gentleman named John Dwyer, who was a veteran of the original Star Trek. So I was thrilled to get to work with this guy, and he was this big, lumbering, friendly, gregarious guy, and he sensed that I was thrilled to be here, and I was like, whatever you need, I'll do it. And so he had, whenever he thought we needed a graphic during the pre-production meeting, he'd say, well, I think we need an Okudagram there. So Dwyer invented the term to refer to the graphics that I did on the show.
I did not know that was a John Dwyer thing. Thank you.
It was a Dwyerism.
Does anybody have any final thoughts, comments, or anything like that? No?
There's just one thing I would like to say. I mentioned that when I read from your book on the conventions, on both of them, you when you're going through the Star Trek fandom, through the fan scene, you meet people who tell you, okay, I'm a huge Star Trek fan, but I don't like Shatner as a person. I do not like him. Or you meet people who tell the same thing about, don't know, about Jonathan Frakes. I heard this once. But I never ever heard that somebody said, I don't like McCoy, I don't like Bones, I don't like DeForest Kelley. I never met any person saying a thing like that. Every time I spoke to people, I told them I was a huge fan of DeForest Kelley. Oh yeah, I love him too. He was so great. And one lady told me, oh, when I was 15, I was so in love with him, with his eyes. He was such a kind of guy. And it's astounding. As I said, you may find people who don't like one or the other actor or even character from Star Trek, but never ever did I hear a bad word about about
At a Denver convention one time, I was there. I think maybe Larry might have been at the same one. This one lady stood up and she told a rather short, really horrendous story about her upbringing. I mean, it was short, not sweet. It was heartrending. And she said, when I was about 15, I didn't think life was worth living. I didn't know anybody who was decent, this, that, and the other thing. She said, and then I discovered Star Trek and I kind of adopted you as my father. And I think you helped me, survive. And she says, I know you don't know me from Adam, but could I give you a hug? And he put his arms out and he said, come to Papa.
Yeah.
There was not a dry eye in the house, and he held her for as long as she wanted to be held. And I just went, that is DeForest Kelley. He was just so in tune with hurting people and people who felt that they were marginalized or in any way thought less of. You just felt beloved in his presence, no matter who you were.
Well, my battery's about to run dead on my phone.
Okay.
I go out of here. Bye to everybody. But just quickly, here in Denver, we have a hospital, Denver Jewish Hospital, that deals with lung issues. And there's a very famous story this was long before any of the movies. There was a young boy in the hospital who had very serious, I don't remember what it was specifically, therefore, and Dee flew to Denver and went up and sat with him in his room and talked with him. And every day I ever drive past that hospital now, the first thing comes to my mind is Dee flying here to Denver to come spend time with that little boy because he loved Dr. McCoy. Mm-hmm. And once again, just another story of the enormous generosity of the man.
Yeah, he said, boy, if there were times when you wish that big needle really worked, because there's something you can't do anything about, but you can just be there.
Yes.
And wow. Well, before anybody loses their contact, thank you, Dan. Thank you all of you for coming and doing this. I hope we'll do this again, maybe every year, It's been an absolute delight. And I know we haven't all told all the stories. But
before we do go, Chris, thank you for doing this because it strikes me every day. Mike knows this, and we all know this. Dan knows this. I take for granted what I know and experienced, and there was a time when I even thought, "Oh, that's old and dusty." But just like with Michelle, with everybody that's out there, it's easy to be up on all the current shows. No matter what you think of them, they're in your face, and the pendulum swings on how we interpret. It's happening to the next generation in DS9 and Voyager now. Mm-hmm. But the shows, the characters, and most of all the people and personalities. For the warts and all, as they say in the art world, the whole picture. Nobody deserves a pedestal like we talked about. But thank you for doing this because I forget that we have a generation that's not very close to Dee or any of this, or the ones that passed. Or we still have Walter and George and Bill Shatner even, but keeping the ones who have passed already, especially.
Most of the people who reach out to me literally are less than 20 years old.
Right.
They discovered McCoy. They go on, to YouTube and find out what they can, see a few interviews, fall in love with the guy and say, oh my God, I don't know enough about this guy. and then they come and they, come read my book usually, and then they'll come in and just like, oh my God, I feel like I've met him, which is what the whole idea of the book was. I wanted you to be able to meet DeForest Kelley if you never had a chance to do that.
Yep.
So that mission was accomplished, and that's the happiest mission I probably
Well, don't
ever
let
had.
it in today, obviously.
I won't. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for doing this. Thank you for including us.
Thank you for being here for me to include.
Thank you guys so much
An
for coming.
honor being here.
Thank you.
Good to
Thank
see
you.
and meet everybody. Yes.
Okay, I'll end the broadcast, and then let's just talk for a couple seconds again before you go.